Welcome to Fairy Tales English Journey, where we master B1 to B2 English through the magic of stories.
Welcome to Fairy Tales English Journey. Today we will explore a famous story. You might think you know the story of the princess and the frog. You might think a sweet kiss broke the magic spell, but the original story is very different. It was not a kiss that saved him. In the true story from long ago, a moment of pure anger changed everything. Yes, you heard that right. A furious princess threw the frog against a wall. This sudden act of anger broke the curse. Let us learn English while we discover the real story of the Frog King. Long ago, in a beautiful kingdom, there lived a king with many daughters. The youngest princess was the most beautiful of them all. The sun itself loved to shine on her face. Near the castle of the king, there was a dark and mysterious forest filled with tall green trees. Under an old lime tree in that forest, there was a deep pool of water. On very hot days, the youngest princess would go into the forest. She loved to sit by the edge of the cool water. When she felt bored, she would play with her favorite golden ball. The golden ball was her most prized possession. She would throw it high into the air and catch it. This was her favorite game. But one day, the golden ball did not fall into her small hands. It bounced on the grass and rolled right into the deep dark water. The princess followed the ball with her eyes, but it sank deep into the pool. The water was so deep that she could not see the bottom. The princess began to cry loudly. She wept and wept because she thought she had lost her beautiful golden ball forever and ever. As she was crying, she heard a strange voice. The voice asked her why she was crying so loudly. The princess looked around to see where the voice came from. She looked down and saw a frog with a thick, ugly head stretching out of the dark green pool water. The princess told the frog that she was crying for her golden ball. The ball had fallen into the deep water. The frog told her not to cry anymore. He said he could help her get the ball back. But he asked what she would give him for his help. The princess offered him anything he wanted. She offered her beautiful clothes, her bright pearls, and her sparkling diamonds. She even offered the golden crown she wore on her head. But the frog did not want her clothes, or her pearls, or her diamonds, or her heavy golden crown either. The frog said he wanted to be her friend and her playmate. He wanted to sit next to her at her little table. He wanted to eat from her little golden plate and drink from her little cup. He also wanted to sleep in her soft and comfortable little bed. The frog told her that if she promised him these things, he would dive down and bring back the golden ball. The princess agreed immediately. She promised to give him everything he asked for. But in her heart, she thought the frog was talking nonsense and could never leave the water. She believed the frog must stay in the water with other frogs. She did not think he could ever be a friend to a human. After the frog received her promise, he dipped his head under the water. He swam down deep and soon came back to the surface again. The frog had the golden ball in his mouth. He threw the ball onto the green grass. The princess was full of joy when she saw her beautiful toy again. She picked up the golden ball and ran away quickly. She completely forgot about the poor frog in the water. The frog called after her to wait for him. He shouted that he could not run as fast as she could. But the princess did not listen to him. She ran all the way back to the castle. She left the frog behind in the deep pool of dark water. The next day, the princess sat at the table with the king and his royal court. She was eating her dinner from her little golden plate. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise outside. Something was creeping up the marble stairs of the castle. It went splat, 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 splat. When the creature reached the top of the stairs, it knocked on the heavy wooden door. A voice called out to the youngest princess and asked her to open the door. The princess ran to see who was outside. When she opened the door, she saw the frog sitting there. She slammed the door shut very quickly and ran back to her seat at the table. She was very frightened. The king noticed that her heart was beating very fast. He asked her if there was a giant outside the door who wanted to take her away from the castle. The princess told her father that it was not a giant, but a disgusting frog. The king asked her what the frog wanted with her. She explained everything that had happened the day before in the forest. She told him about the golden ball and the promise she had made. The princess said she never believed the frog could leave the water, but now he was outside the door and wanted to come inside. The frog knocked a second time and called out to her. He reminded her of the promise she made by the cool water of the pool. The king looked at his daughter with a serious face. He told her that she must keep the promise she had made. He ordered her to go and open the door for the frog. The princess walked slowly to the door and opened it. The frog hopped into the room. The frog followed her all the way to her chair. He stopped by her feet and asked her to lift him up beside her. The princess hesitated and did not want to touch him. Finally, the king ordered her to lift the frog onto the chair next to her own. Once the frog was on the chair, he wanted to be on the table. When he was on the table, he asked her to push her golden plate closer. He wanted them to eat together from the same plate. The princess did this, but everyone could see she was unhappy. The frog enjoyed his meal very much, but almost every bite the princess took made her feel sick. She could not stand the sight of the wet green creature eating from her beautiful golden plate. After he finished eating, the frog said he was tired and wanted to sleep now. He asked her to carry him to her room and prepare her soft silk bed. The princess began to cry again. She was afraid of the cold frog and did not want him in her clean, beautiful bed. The king grew very angry with her tears and her constant complaining. The king told her she should not despise someone who helped her when she was in trouble. He reminded her that a royal promise must never be broken. So she picked up the frog with 2 fingers. She carried him upstairs and put him in a corner of her room. When she was lying in her soft bed, the frog crept over to her. He said he was tired and wanted to sleep comfortably just like her. He told her to lift him up into the bed or he would tell her father. This made the princess incredibly angry now. She could not hold back her furious feelings anymore. She picked up the frog and threw him with all her strength against the stone wall. She yelled at him to be quiet and called him a horrible creature. She thought he would surely die from hitting the hard stone wall. But when he fell to the floor, he was no longer a frog. Right before her eyes, he transformed into a human. He was a handsome prince with kind and beautiful eyes. The magic spell was broken. The princess was completely shocked by what she saw in her own bedroom. The prince explained everything to the amazed princess. He told her that a wicked witch had cursed him. The witch had turned him into a frog and trapped him in the deep pool. He said that no one in the world could have rescued him from the water except her. The prince smiled at her and said they would go to his kingdom the next day. By the will of her father, the prince was now her dear companion and future husband. They both fell asleep and rested peacefully until the bright morning sun woke them up the next day. When the sun rose, a beautiful carriage drove up to the castle. The carriage was pulled by 8 magnificent white horses. The horses had white feathers on their heads and wore golden harnesses. Behind the carriage stood the faithful servant of the young king, whose name was Faithful Henry today. Faithful Henry had suffered greatly when his master was turned into a frog. He had been so sad that he placed 3 iron bands around his own heart. These iron bands kept his heart from breaking into pieces from terrible sorrow and deep pain. He was very loyal and true. The carriage was ready to take the young king back to his own kingdom. Faithful Henry helped them both into the carriage. He then took his place at the back of the carriage again. He was full of joy because his master was finally free from the dark magic spell. As they were driving along the road, the king heard a loud cracking sound behind him. It sounded like something had broken. The king turned around and called out to his servant. He asked Henry if the carriage was breaking apart because the sound was so very loud and sudden. Henry answered that the carriage was not breaking. He explained that it was a band from his heart. He had placed the iron bands around his heart when the king was a frog in the well. Now that the king was free, the bands were breaking from pure happiness today. Twice more during the journey, the king heard the same cracking sound. Each time he thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the iron bands snapping from Faithful Henry's heart. His master was safe and happy, so his heart could finally beat freely without any iron bands holding it. Now you know the real story of the Frog King. Many people believe the princess kissed the frog to break the spell. Modern movies and books often show a sweet kiss. But in the original story recorded by the famous brothers Grimm, there was no kiss at all that day. Instead, it was an act of sudden violence and extreme anger. The princess threw the frog against the wall because she was furious. She was tired of being forced to share her life with a creature she hated. Her violent reaction is what finally shattered the dark magic spell forever. Why did the curse break from anger instead of love? Some experts believe the spell required a genuine human emotion to break. The princess was not pretending anymore. Her anger was completely real and honest. This raw honesty was powerful enough to destroy the magic of the wicked old witch. Throwing the frog against the wall was a moment of taking control. The princess stopped being a passive victim of the rules. She asserted her own boundaries and refused to be pushed any further. In fairy tales, breaking the rules often leads to a sudden and magical transformation of reality. This story is also about growing up and taking responsibility. The princess wanted to play with her golden ball like a child. She made promises she did not want to keep. Her father forced her to face the consequences of her own words. This was a hard lesson to learn. The frog represents the unpleasant duties we must face in life. We cannot ignore our promises just because they are difficult or uncomfortable. By forcing the princess to keep her word, the king taught her honor. She had to learn that true royalty means keeping your promises no matter what. The character of faithful Henry adds a deep layer of emotion to the story. His iron bands show how physical pain can come from emotional sorrow. When his master is saved, his heart literally breaks free. This teaches us about the incredible power of loyalty, friendship, and true human devotion. Let us review some useful English words from this story. The word furious means very angry. When the princess threw the frog, she was furious. Another good word is transformed. Transformed means changed completely. The ugly wet frog transformed into a handsome young prince right before her very own eyes. We also learned the word faithful. Faithful means remaining loyal and true to someone. Henry was a faithful servant to the king. A promise is a statement that you will definitely do something. The king told his daughter she must keep her promise. These words are great for English learners. Notice how he used the past tense to tell the story. We said the ball rolled and the princess cried. Fairy tales are excellent tools for practicing English past tense verbs. Reading stories helps you naturally understand how verbs change when we talk about things that happened long ago here. To practice your English, try telling this story to a friend. Remember to include the part about the wall instead of the kiss. Explain why the princess was so angry. Using your own words to retell a story is one of the best ways to improve your English speaking skills. The moral of the story reminds us to keep our promises. Even if we make a promise in a moment of panic, we must honor it. It also shows that sometimes facing our fears and expressing our true feelings can lead to beautiful transformations. Honesty brings out the real truth. Thank you for joining us today on Fairy Tales English Journey. We hope you enjoyed learning the true original story of the Frog King. It is fascinating how fairy tales change over time. The real stories are often much darker and more interesting than the modern versions we know today. If you liked this video, please subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment below and tell us if you prefer the kiss or the wall. Keep practicing your English every single day. We will see you next time with another magical and educational fairy tale story. Goodbye for now, friends.